Hi guys, today I'm making Idia from Disney's Twisted Wonderland. I know I said that Riddle was the hardest thing I've ever made, but I think Idia beat him with this crazy hair. This was challenging to say the least, but it was requested, so I did my best. Rather than use the skin tone right out of the package, I added some white because Idia is so pale. I then rolled it up into a ball. Like all the other ones, this will be the head. For the body, I took some black clay and shaped it out into the size of the body that I wanted. As a heads up, I did end up making this a little too long and ended up cutting it in half. To make sure all the edges were straight, I used my blade to cut off all the rounded edges. In all my other videos where I made Twisted Wonderland characters, I attached the head pretty early on, but in this video I decided to make all the other pieces for it first. Here I'm rolling out some black clay for the arms. After rolling out the black clay, I took some skin tone clay, rolled it out to the same thickness, and then cut the edges at the same length so that way the hand would look like it was actually supposed to be popping out of a sleeve, so that way also that they're the same size. Next, I'm going to cut out a triangle shape at the top of the body. I then filled that area in with more of the skin tone clay. For the collar, I took some dark blue clay, flattened it out, and then cut it out with my X-Acto knife into the shapes that I needed. For his, what I can only call a half vest with a strap, I'm using the same color dark blue clay and cutting it out into what appears to be a half a vest. Once it was all cut out, I went ahead and stuck it on the body. For the pattern on his sweatshirt, I took my needle tool and tried to carve out the design. His design on the sweatshirt is a little confusing. It's almost like a bunch of diamonds all hooked together, or triangles. Kind of difficult to explain what's going on there. I did my best. For the pocket on the vest, I took more of the same color blue clay and cut out a little square and then stuck it on the top. I then added some designs with my needle tool. For the pants, I mixed up some black and blue clay. I then repeated the same process with the legs as I did with the arms. I rolled out the navy blue clay and then made the shoes black by rolling out the same thickness of black clay and then cutting off the same amount from both ends and swapping the colors out. I did take a little bit of the navy blue clay and stuck it on top of the body so that way it looked like that was where the pants were starting. After this, I attached the legs. After this, I took more of the light blue clay and did my best to copy the design of his sneakers. For the strap, I took some more of the same colored light blue clay and then cut out a strip and then placed it across the front of him. I then took some black clay and made it into a thin strip and made triangle shapes on the strap. Now, if you watched any of my other Twisted Wonderland charms, you'll notice at this point that I didn't put the arms on at first. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to, more fitting for his character, make him hold his arms in front of him. So I had to finish the front of him first so that way I could actually properly do all the designs before putting his arms on top. Once his arms were on, I was able to go in with my needle tool and do the same designs on the sleeves as I did with the front of the jacket. Now that the body is pretty much done, I was able to add the head. For his eyes, I used my dotting tool to make the holes, and then I'm using some yellow clay for the eyes. Let me know in the comment section down below, do you think his eyes would glow in the dark or not? I made Malleus's eyes glow in the dark for the fun of it, and I think we all know how that turned out under the black light. Since his hair was going to be so complicated and because the body was pretty much done, I decided to save my progress by baking him. I had a request before that I videotape more of doing the hair for the characters, and in the past it's been pretty difficult, but since this charm is primarily just going to be focused around Ida's hair since it's such a big amount of his character design, I decided to videotape all of it. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense and it's kind of boring and difficult, but here's the footage. I started off by mixing up a really big amount of blue clay and started up on the bangs first. Now this is going to be done in multiple stages where I actually do multiple layers and then bake in between layers, because if you've ever worked with polymer clay, you know that baking a charm is kind of like a saving progress step where you can add more on later and then bake it, but everything that was done before will be saved so that way you can't mess anything up. And while we're watching this, it seems like a good time to ask everybody, who would you like me to make next out of all the Disney Twisted Wonderland characters? I'm thinking 2 comments for the next charm if anybody chooses the same character, 3 comments if you guys want me to do it in an event costume, and 4 to 5 comments if you want me to do an Overblot. I'm not looking forward to trying an Overblot, but I'm willing to give it a try if you guys want me to do it. As you can see here, this is like the flat part of the front of his bangs, and now I have to move on to the back. So with the other charms that I did, I kind of just made a rough draft of the hair and kind of just built up a very flat piece because it didn't really like matter to their character. Where with Ida, his hair is such an important part of him that I had to do a bit of research, and it wasn't pretty. There's such a flame thing going on. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful with his design, but in a polymer clay charm, it was a pain to make. But I ended up pulling it off pretty good. I think I did a pretty good job. Just, I never want to make this again, ever. You guys had to pick like the hardest hair to do ever. Why? You can also see here that I'm using a little silicone tool to kind of add texture. You can also see that I gave him a little stand of white polymer clay because he wouldn't stand up on his own and I couldn't lay him down or else it would ruin his hair. So this is like the first layer of his hair. I went ahead and baked this so that way nothing else would get ruined. The next part that I added was the top pieces on his head. I wanted to make sure that I did these right because these are kind of like the most important part of his hair is all these pieces that like stick up. It gives it the proper flame texture to it. He looked so silly with just one, I couldn't stop laughing. At this point, I ended up feeling comfortable enough with the hair that I finished up some last tidbits of the body before finishing up with the final bake. So I actually forgot that he had a belt on, so this was my last minute attempt to add one. I think it would have gone a little bit better had I added it while the clay was still wet on his body, but it doesn't really matter. I cut out 2 blue strips of clay and separated them out in the middle because he actually has like a clip in the middle. I flattened out some black clay and strung it in the middle, and then added a little piece of black for the clip. For the things on his belt, I flattened out some more of the blue clay and then cut some out with my X-Acto knife. For the design on the pockets, I used my needle tool. And since that's all done, I was able to bake the charm. This is it fresh out of the oven. I ended up popping off that white piece on the bottom, so that way it wasn't a little figure and instead a charm. You can see that a little bit of white residue is left there, and that comes into play later. For any of the design work and to fix up any mistakes I made, I'm going to be using some acrylic paint. To cover up the white residue from the clay, I'm using some black paint and putting it on with one of my dotting tools. To get a similar effect as what his hair has in the picture, I watered down some white paint and applied it to the tips. I then took some watered down dark blue paint and applied it to the center. I then took the same dark blue paint and added it to anywhere that I felt it looked good. And here he is, all painted. All that's left now is to glaze him with some resin. Then you have to cure it with a UV light, and then it's done. And here is my Idia Shroud charm completely done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave in the comment section down below who you think I should make next. I'd also really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Bye!